Welcome to the 2017 inaugural Suds in Science. The science part's right here. If you don't have a Suds, you are too late. The talk is about to begin, but the bar is still open afterwards. So we'll be here. I am not Chris Rimmer, our executive director. I am Jason Hill, a younger and less attractive version of Chris Rimmer. But I'm a conservation biologist at the Vermont Center for Eco Studies, as well as our associate director back there, Susan Hindiger, and her two daughters right up front. If you don't know Vermont Center for Eco Studies, we are a conservation and research organization based right here in Norwich. Our mission is to advance the conservation of wildlife across the Americas through a combination of citizen science, monitoring, and research. We're primarily based here in Vermont, but we go anywhere that our organisms take us. That's as far as exotic far-flung locales like Kansas, North Dakota. Oh no, it's really nice in the spring. Dominican Republic and the Galapagos. A lot of our research is driven through citizen scientists. Bridget is going to talk to you tonight about WebPast, the citizen science program. A lot of our research is driven by people like yourselves who collect data in collaboration with us. We do research on bees and butterflies and birds all over the place. If that sounds like something you're interested in, Susan or Jason, myself, will be here afterwards, and I'm happy to talk to you about that or get you on our newsletter list. But we are here tonight to be entertained and informed by Bridget Butler, Program Director, Naturalist, and Program Director at Cold Hollow, Canada, and thank you for making the long 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
Wow, 2-hour drive down tonight, so hopefully we're a good audience. So, yes, I want to tell you a little bit about the Cold Hollow, Canada is an organization that works to ensure a healthy and intact forested landscape, supports a strong and sustainable local economy through stewardship across the northern forest. Bridget is a naturalist and, as I've been told, an outstanding birder. If you hadn't had the opportunity to take a birding tour with Bridget, you are missing out on a unique opportunity. You can find out about the Bird Diva at birddiva.com on her website and find out what she's up to. And tonight she's going to talk to us about her citizen science initiative, WebPast.
Awesome.
Thanks, Bridget.
Thank you. Who's ready to talk about dead stuff?
Yeah.
I have never seen so many people come out to talk about roadkill. Most of the time I'm talking about birds, things that are very inspiring to people and eye-catching. And I guess maybe roadkill is in an entirely different way as well. So thank you to the Vermont Center for Eco Studies for having me. I have a great relationship with a lot of the biologists there and look up to and rely on the work that you guys do for inspiration, for background content for some of the work that I do both as Bird Diva and in my role as the program director at Cold Hollow, Canada. So let me just tell you a little bit more about Cold Hollow, Canada. So I'll give you a little bit of a background there. We're going to talk a little bit about wildlife connectivity tonight. We're going to talk about some of the impacts that roads have on animals and on people. And then I'm going to give you an overview of our Wild Paths project, which just finished its first season this fall through the summertime. And then, oh my gosh, I'm going to share results with you. You guys are going to be the first to see, even before our members, the results of this summer. So woohoo, that's going to be awesome. And then we'll talk a little bit about desired goals and outcomes from projects like this. One of our big hopes with Wild Paths, and one of the ways that we designed it, was in a way that it could be shared with everyone, which is also something that Vermont Center for Eco Studies is really big on, is being open about sharing data and knowledge, and we really believe in that as well. So, Cold Hollow, Canada. Anybody know where the Cold Hollows are? Awesome. Okay, so go back up 89, hit the Green Mountains, and then hike up north across the top of the Green Mountains, and then just keep going until you hit Fletcher, Waterville, and Belvedere. And then stay up there, stay on top, and the hollow kind of drops off to the west, right? The west, yep. And we're going to keep going through. Let's see, the next that you hit is Bakersfield, Montgomery, Enosburg, and Richford, right up to the Canadian border. So that's our service area. We service 7 towns there. And the way that we like to think about Cold Hollow, Canada is we're kind of this nexus between the bigger organizations like TNC and VLT, some other groups I'm going to talk to you about tonight, which is called the Staying Connected Initiative in 2 Countries, 1 Forest, that are working on wildlife connectivity across the region, and all the little people in the communities, like our small conservation commissions and our regional conservation partnerships in the area, our private landowners and our planning commissions, and in this case, right down to some of our road crews as well. So we're kind of the hub for all of that, where we can bring information down from those larger organizations and bring information up from the people in the communities that we serve. We have 3 core programs. One of them is our citizen science program. So we have Wild Paths and we have Keeping Track, which some of you may know through Sue Morris. We do have Keeping Track transects through our service region. And the next core program is our Cold Hollow Woodlots program, which gathers landowners together in a peer-to-peer kind of almost like a neighborhood watch group, where we look at kind of taking all of our stewardship plans and looking at them on a landscape scale. And what Cold Hollow Canada has done is identified core forest blocks across our region. And then we've looked at the landowners that are there that have about 50 acres or more. And then we invite them to be part of a woodlots group, and we provide them with technical assistance, support. We help them kind of take all of their stewardship plans and get out of working in a bubble and working together, looking at like kind of the big landscape scale of how we can kind of protect that forest area. So some of our Keeping Track transects are within those core forest blocks. We have 1 pilot woodlot group, and we're really excited. We just announced last week that we landed a grant for $640,000 to extend into our next couple of towns. So we'll be going into Montgomery, and we'll be going into Richford, and this time we will be able to say to the landowners, we have money so that you can implement practices that we recommend through our stewardship work together, planning work together, through the climate change assessment that we're going to supply to you, and through our songbird assessment that we're going to provide to you through our partners, Audubon Vermont. So we're excited to be able to have that money now to say, come and be a part of this group when the invitations go out in the next month, which is really great. Part of that work also is looking at wildlife connectivity, and that's where our Wild Paths kind of comes in. So we're going to look a little bit at that tonight as well. Does anybody have any questions about Cold Hollow Canada before we dive the rest of the way in here?
Is it warmer up there?
Is it warmer up there? I'm from St. Albans, so it is a little bit warmer, but there's as much snow there as there is here in the higher elevations right now. I have to go there to get snow from where I am down near the lake. All right, so close your eyes for a minute. I'm going to take you to a sad place. See if you remember that first time that you had a collision or a near collision with an animal, and how you felt, and what happened afterwards, maybe where that animal was trying to get to. Can you see the place where you were? I can see it because it happened to me tonight on my way over here. I was traveling down Beaver Meadow Road, and I had 2 deer come out from conifers on one side and conifers on the other, and go to move in front of my vehicle. And luckily, I knew I was on my way to talk about roadkill, so I was ready for it. And I slowed down in time. So a lot of us, how many of you have had just a near miss, haven't had a hit? Oh, awesome, good, good, good. How many of you have had one of those big collisions that cost you some money? Okay. All right, right? How many of you are not driving yet? Yeah. All right, so part of this work, our focus, obviously with Cold Hollow Canada, is about habitat, protecting forest health so that we can protect our working landscape, so that we can become more resilient and adapted to climate change. But the wildlife is also a really big part of that. And so all of our work focuses on connectivity. So right to where we work with our landowners, we want our landowners connected with one another. And we look at ways to conserve land in those areas and then protect the wildlife in those areas. So connectivity, there's some really interesting things that kind of happen with connectivity. And we talk about wildlife corridors, and some of the things that have popped into my head when I'm thinking about this and trying to work with landowners on this. And what's great with our neighbor-to-neighbor thing is it's kind of obvious. When you can take that landscape view and kind of zoom way up. How many of you have used Google Maps? It's really awesome to be able to zoom up and then like zoom out over things. So we can look at large forest blocks, right? And some of us might own some of these large forest blocks. And they might look like this, and some of them might be connected with one another, which is really awesome, but some of them might not be, okay? And there are different ways that we can try to look at how animals travel across the landscape. So they might be able to move from one large patch to another, but another thing that we can look for are places where there are corridors. And some of these corridors might be linear, like just kind of straight up like this, where there's more habitat in here for the animal to move from one place to another. Or they might look like little stepping stones. And I think about this a lot with birds. When I work with landowners and talk to them about hard edges where a habitat like ends and drops off, and you might have like a big meadow or field, how do we soften edges? How do we make them kind of gradually drop off? And how do we provide islands for things to move from one place to another? So when we think about wildlife corridors, we could call these stepping stones. So can we look at stepping stones and then think about how animals move from one place to another? Another big part of this are river corridors, right? Because rivers are a big part of, and wetlands, and I'm going to try to draw a little wetland in here. And who's laughing at my drawing? All right. So one of the ways that we can look at landscape and good connected areas, animals really like to, especially mammals, really like to move from places where there are coniferous woodlands or wetlands that are connected to one another or adjacent to one another. And the problem comes when we have roads. Oh, and I don't have my black marker out to be a road. When roads start to bisect these places and divide them. All right, we're just going to go, I'm not going to dig it out. We'll just go with the blue. And we'll do a double line. So I think about where I live and the Missisquoi River. And so sometimes we have roads that follow right along the edge of the river, right? So that can be a problem. Sometimes we have roads that kind of split even through some of these patches, like this. I'm going to connect this road down here, like this. Or they might kind of split through some of these stepping stones, which is what I think Beaver Meadow Road is. Kind of cut right through there, where animals are going to have to be forced to cross a roadway in one way or another. And animals move for different reasons. Anybody have ideas why animals need to move? Food, okay, right? What else?
Habitat loss.
Habitat loss, so if they're forced to move, but just let's say it's all hunky-dory, everything's good. Why do animals need to move around?
Because they're being chased.
Maybe they're being chased.
Reproduction.
Reproduction, right? So one of the main things is to keep that gene pool really strong, right? So we need them to be able to move and disperse so that they can mate. Yeah.
Seasonal, to get warm.
Yeah, seasonality, right? Migration, to move from one spot to another. Birds are my wheelhouse, so I'm gonna keep using those. I think of juncos that are up high in the mountains during the summertime, and then they push down into the lowlands. I mean, even moose are going to do that as well, right? Spring, they're gonna come down into the lowlands to feed in the wetlands, and then they go up to higher elevations, right? Bear need huge amount of acres. I want to say 10,000 acres is like a good, I'm looking at forest here for a good,
Sounds good.
yeah, habitat range. So some larger mammals need a much larger contiguous block of unfragmented forest to be able to survive in. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of that left, right? So part of our work is to conserve that, but then also look at ways to lessen the impacts on some of these animals. There's been some really interesting work that's been done out west with grizzly bears and how fragmented habitat has created these little genetic pools where all this inbreeding is happening. And so the health of the animals is decreasing. If we think about climate change and how it's going to push animals to different ranges, we're also going to have to look at that type of migrational shift as our climate shifts as well. So one of the things that we're trying to work on is identifying where these places are. So I'm going to share some maps with you. This is another exciting piece that just came out of having a intern. Yay for interns. Who's ever been an intern? Yes, we love you. We love you. Thank you. So I obviously don't have enough of these to go around. So if you could take one and then maybe, and you know what, I'll pass out another one as well. But these are maps of our wild paths study area. And what we did is we used some of the work from the state. So the state does all this great, I'm going to say guessing, right? So it's all based on looking at topography and forest habitat, GIS mapping and modeling. I tried to take a course on it. I still don't totally understand it. So I have to get interns who understand some of that. And I have to borrow data from other people. But that's all right, because the state has some really great information about where wildlife are crossing roadways. And this second one, so one of the maps that's going around is our whole service area. This other map is a town-specific one, so I'm going to pass this one to the back row this way, and to the back of the room this way. This is Richford. I'm going to save one here so I make sure I'm describing stuff appropriately. So, couple things that happened. So the state did some modeling to look at where there were potential sites for animals to be crossing roadways. And obviously some of those sites are going to be where there are coniferous forests and wetlands and rivers and things like that. But then they also wanted to look at something called structural pathways, which is where it kind of amps it up a little bit more. It looks at all of these different pieces and says, where are the areas where an animal is most likely to be comfortable moving? And they did this for larger mammals. So we're thinking about bear, moose, deer. I think marten is in there, bobcat, Canada lynx as well, okay? So on the map, what you're looking at are, we have priority wildlife crossing sites and wildlife crossing sites. So there were a number of sites that were ranked different. I think we took the highest ranked and then the second highest ranked, and we put them on the maps. So these were spots where the habitat was telling us that it was likely that animals might be crossing, right? So this is the modeling part. And then the Staying Connected initiative, with help from Vermont Fish and Wildlife, Jens Hilke, did this structural pathways modeling, where they then looked at the habitat on either side of roadways, and they looked at where animals were most likely to be moving, where there was the right habitat, all the right types of resources, and the habitat was largely unfragmented, and where the animals would likely be moving. So that's the hatch marked kind of spots. I think it's in blue on most of the maps. I'm gonna look over your shoulder. Yep. So the little boxes with the blue lines through them. So these are the places now that we based our project work on, which was, can we prove that animals are either unsuccessfully crossing here or successfully crossing here? We had a wonderful intern who took a map that was really convoluted and heavy, and he worked all through the summer, and he came up with the new Wild Paths Study Area map, and now a map for every single town, which you guys are seeing the final product of. This is exciting. I'm like, ta-da! Which will be available online now for each of our towns to be able to access. So the idea is to get folks to sign up to help us kind of ground truth this. Why do we want them to do this? Because road impacts are pretty deep. Do you have a question? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, okay. Anybody have a question about the maps? We're gonna come back to this in a minute. All right, so road impacts. And I'm gonna cheat here, because it's really hard to do this without slides. Because sometimes you do use slides to keep you on track. So I have my cheat sheet here. And what kind of blows my mind is there's all these different ways that roads kind of impact wildlife. In fact, there's 7 different ways. And then we gotta add the people component in there. And this is a big part of what we take to the town. So we've talked to each town about why wild paths is important. And we talk about it being important to people, and we talk about it being important to wildlife. And what we want to do ultimately is look at ways to decrease the problems for both people and wildlife. So the first 7 things are things that impact animals in terms of roads. And we're talking about all animals here now, from mammals to birds to reptiles to amphibians. So basic road construction can cause mortality. Whenever we put a road in, one of the things that can be helpful now that we have this type of resource in these maps is we can look when we are going after new road construction, how is it going to impact how animals move to and from a place. So there can also be road mortality in terms of collisions, and we all know, how many people have hit a moose here? Anybody ever hit a moose? Oh, ow. Okay, I have deer and rabbit are mine. Anybody? Deer? How many deer? Okay, right. Bear?
I almost did a burrow in the middle of the night in Mexico.
A what?
A
Burrow.
It was just,
How about a cow?
It was
Anybody
just-
almost hit a cow
it was
here?
just standing there looking at us.
You know. So, yeah,
I have a relative who hit a black bear on Route 9 in southern Vermont.
in southern Vermont.
Yeah, just about totaled her car.
Right,
I'm not sure about the bear.
about the bear. So this is where like that people animal safety thing comes in, because it's both people and animals. One of the other things that I find really interesting that, jump in.
Oh, my dad hit a moose.
Your dad hit a moose too, and your mom? Oh, that was you. Okay, so those two go together. I was gonna say, way to go, you guys.
Same move.
So we're gonna work on the behavior part later here, the people behavior change part. But one of the pieces, and this is behavior too, that I find interesting is that roads change the way animals behave and where they choose to walk and move to. And one of the communities that I was in, I was hanging out in, I was near Smuggler's Notch, so Jeffersonville, and I was going out to Belvedere to do a story with Channel 3 on this project. And I'm in the line to get a sandwich, and this person recognized me. He's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm doing roadkill stuff." And all of a sudden, like, all the local people that were in the store were like, "This is the spot you gotta go to because the deer are here and this is where they're crossing the road." And this other guy says to me, "There's this one spot where they don't cross anymore, where we used to hit them all the time." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, "What do you think changed?" And he's like, "The farmer stopped growing crops in this one field, so that the use of the habitat on the side of the road changed, and that changed how the animals moved." So it can be, when we think about solutions, it can be a positive and a negative, right? We can use behavior in our favor. Disruption of the physical environment, that's pretty obvious when we think of also about aquatic organisms passing and some of those river corridors that I drew in there. When we alter the way rivers flow and things like that, there's animals that are moving along those areas. I think about the drop-offs that I came across on 89 on my way down here, and you would see tracks coming across the road, and then there's like the big drop off with like the cliff, right? And you could see the tracks are like, whoa, and they go out and around, right? So that's how we're changing the physical environment. We can think about the structures that we put up. We were talking about fences earlier when I first got here, about how even some of our infrastructure is causing animals to change how they move. Alteration of the chemical environment, road salt, right, this time of year. The spread of exotic and invasive species also along roadways changes the habitat on either side. I think of, what's that weed that burns your skin? Yeah, wild, turtle, and then parsnip, yeah, the poison parsnip. And then changes in human use of land or water, and we kind of talked about that with the water example. So the two numbers at the bottom, anybody got a guess for those? The first number is 1 billion, and the second number is 165.
A billion animals killed on the road every year.
No. But,
She knows.
yes, what do you think?
1 billion people, have seen roadkill, and then 165 people have actually hit roadkill.
You're so close. Okay, so if this is the animal part, this is the people part, and the people, how it impacts people. So $1 billion in damages annually from road collisions.
US.
Yeah, U.S. And
Seriously.
yeah. So there's an economic reason to do this as well, right? If you think about if you were one of those people who had your vehicle totaled, right, and maybe the insurance company didn't help you out, I don't know. Think about that cost as well. So there is a cost. And the next number,
Is that people fatalities?
that's people killed. Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
on average annually. Due
How
to
many are moose?
wildlife collision. I know, facet, right? It would be really fascinating to break that down. And we think moose here, but then if you're in other parts of the country, it's like elk and what else is big? Bison,
Caribou.
buffalo, right? All of those things. Okay, so there's a financial piece to this too. And those are the types of things that we like to bring to the towns that we work with in terms of like getting them on board with this project and thinking about how we can make some changes. All right, so is that next? I don't know. I don't think so. Let's see. It's not. Oh, teaser. All right. So the WebPast project itself. So right, we want to come up with some solutions for this, for people and for wildlife. The other big part of this that I always think about is that we want to make changes that are good for wildlife to be able to move across the road, both terrestrial and aquatic, so under the road, right? There's a lot of projects about aquatic organism passage, but how do we make sure that it's good for terrestrial animal passage? And how do we make sure that that infrastructure is sound as we move forward in the face of climate change? I mean, if you think about Irene and all the retrofitting of different culverts and bridges and things like that, right? So the towns that we work in, small budgets, not a lot of money, you gotta replace those things, you know, it takes a lot to get that done. So how do we provide them with the information that they need to do the project once and do it in a way that's gonna be good for all three of those things? That's our ultimate goal. So WildPaths actually started, I want to say back in 2010. And the idea was to take some of the work that the state had done and the Staying Connected initiative had done and get it on the ground to ground truth some of the modeling. And what happened is there wasn't a coordinator. And it went for about a year. And they got some people involved. They got, I don't know, I want to say 20 to 30 people involved. There was training. There was protocols where you couldn't go out with by yourself. You had to go out with other people. So the protocols were rigid. It was during the winter time. You had to know tracking, and you had to go out once a month. Barrier, no coordinator, boom.
So who was the one guy that signed up?
It blew up, right? So it didn't stay together. And that's when I came to the Vermont Center for Eco Studies and said, Kent, help me. What are the good ways to put together a solid citizen science project? And I looked at other models all over the place. And what I came up with was I had to get rid of some of these barriers. So we had to make it easy for people to participate. The attraction was already the roadkill piece. You know, I want you to go out and look for dead things. And I want you to go out and have near misses. And I want you to tell me about it. I want you to tell me that story and put it on a map where it is, right? So the hook's already there. That was really easy. That was the easy part. And then making it easy for people to participate. So no training. You can come to a walk and we'll teach you the protocols. Well, where are we going to get the protocols? Well, that was a Google search away and a Twitter search away and a Facebook search away. And I found UC Davis, and I found a project through Maine Audubon called Roadwatch. They had all the protocols down. They were 3 years into the project. They were about to publish a report. I said, hey, can I steal your protocols? She said, sure. And you know what's really great is they're part of the Northern Forest Linkage, which is part of the work that the Staying Connected initiative is doing in the region. So now all our data can talk to each other. So we're all collecting the same thing. All right, so another barrier. People up here don't like computers. I don't know if you guys are the same way, but no one, and there's no smartphone service. So I can't just send people out with smartphones, right? There's no Wi-Fi in Belvedere. You're like, there's none of that, right? So you have people that are intimidated by the computers, and the inability to kind of engage the people that are really into technology because you can't really use your smartphone. So we figured out a way to kind of make all of that as simple as possible. So there are forms, and we took the forms right from Maine Audubon. We made them really simple, and we asked people to do two things. You can submit a random observation, and these are all available on our website, so if you want to steal them, great, and use them in your own area, you can do that. So there are two ways you can participate. You could do a random observation, right? I'm just driving down the street like tonight, and the deer jump out, and you can grab a form out of your glove box and send it to me. Right, and you stop the car, pull over safely, put on your hazard lights. Believe me, that's all in the protocols, right? Orange vest, all of that kind of stuff. All right, so a lot of the work was already done for us, which was great. Maine Audubon was really happy to share. We made it easy. You could send me the form through email. You can send me the form through email. You can go online, and the form online follows the form that is the piece of paper as well. So, and I'm gonna, is there an extra one? Now that I'm like, I gotta. All right, so basically, the data sheet starts with the little small gray box at the top, asks you some basic information, and you can fill this out really simply if you just have a random observation. So we're looking at some core things. It was, so the state said, and when I neglected to say this, is I went to Fish and Wildlife and I went to VTrans and I said, what do I do? And you need to get this project back on board. And they said, this is the basic information that you need to collect. And this is the extra information that would be helpful. So there's a little bit of both. Time, the species, is it dead or alive? How many? How confident are you in your identification of that species? And believe me, it all depends on how old it is, which is also part of this as well. How long do you think it's been there? What's the speed limit on the road? Can you give me a location? So, and this is a challenge that we didn't want to take on in the first year because some people know how to get latitude and longitude off their phone. Some people have a GPS unit that they know how to use. Some people know all the roads, all the back roads really well. And other people, I just said, just describe it for me, or give me the closest mailbox, or go take the number off of the telephone pole, and I will send an intern out to find it. And they love doing this. It's great. I have no problem getting interns to go drive back roads in the summertime. Roadside features. So these were the extra things that VTrans thought would be interesting to know, and actually are. I've learned a lot about box beams and W beams. Anybody got an idea? Box beam is the guardrail that's shaped like a box, a long box, that long rectangular box. W beam, yeah, there you go. You just did it. W beam is the one that does this weird wiggly thing. So the W on its side, or an M if you want it to be an M. Cable, right? That's the other type of barrier. Fencing, is it parallel to the road? Is it perpendicular to the road? Median barriers, the things that go down the middle of the road. Is it concrete? Is it a guardrail of any type? Is there a culvert, bridge, railroad crossing, or cattle crossing anywhere nearby? And then I threw the last one in because I like birds, which is canopy cover. And when I finally show you and reveal the movement guilds, isn't that fun, guilds? Movement guilds of animals, you'll understand why canopy cover is important. It's actually important in a bunch of different ways. So this sheet actually allows you to do 1, 2, 3, 4 different sightings. So you could send this in to me for, hopefully you don't come across 4 in one trip, but you never know. So random observation, you could just fill out this chunk of information and send it to me. You could do it online as well. The other thing that you could do is sign up for a roadway, and you can do it monthly. And what we then do is we look at those maps, and I have a list of roads that are all of our priority roads on those maps that I showed you. And I say, do you walk? Do you walk your dog? Do you jog? Do you bike? Are you a cyclist? Is it your commute every day? And we get people to sign up for those roads, and they go out once a month. Really easy, once a month. If you see something, send me the form, put it online. If you don't, send me the form and just say I didn't see anything and I did it this month and this is what the weather was like. And that's it.
What are the species you're looking for? I mean, is it amphibians?
Everything. Except insects. because that gets crazy. It does. Amphibians, reptiles, mammals, birds. And I'll tell you, that was another part of the project, that when the project first started out, it only happened during the winter time. Because they wanted to look at tracks. And then you had to have the track training, which was really hard for some people. They didn't want, I'm not sure what this is. That can be really hard, and that doesn't make the person comfortable. And so what I learned was the time of year that animals are actually moving is when? Fall and spring, right? That's when animals are really moving. And then we decided, well, we got to get amphibians and reptiles in here. Some of CHC's work that we're starting to dabble in right now has to do with wood turtles. Our partner across the border, Corridor Appalachienne, which is much like us, they are looking at wood turtle populations along the reach of the Missisquoi that goes into Quebec. So we're starting to team up with them on that. And we figured this can capture part of that as well. So it's everything but bugs,
And you're
insects.
talking about the whole region. New Hampshire, or just Cold Hollow.
So this is where it gets interesting. So Cold Hollow is our focus. The other thing that we did is I wanted to reach out to those people who are interested in technology. And we do have some people who have learned how to use iNaturalist, which most of you are probably familiar with if you're hanging with Vermont Center for Eco Studies. It's an online platform that allows you to capture an observation and then submit it to a larger database that can be used by scientists in a variety of different ways. So the Vermont, I'm gonna get it wrong, because it used to be the Vermont Atlas of Life. It still is, because it was something else before. The words were switched. So the Vermont Atlas of Life is run by the Vermont Center for Eco Studies. You can snap a photo of flora, fauna, insects, anything, and it goes into this larger database to understand the biodiversity that we have in Vermont. So we're doing the same thing with wild paths. So the wild paths project exists for the entire state online as well, which is the other reason why I wanted to come here, is because you guys can participate too. We wanted this to be a model for the entire state. The state doesn't have the staff to be able to go out and do this ground truthing, so we wanted to test a model that could work for everybody. And I'm really excited. We have a bunch of different folks that are kind of reporting from all over, and all of that data is open source, so if you contact us and you want it, we will send it to you for your community. So you can use all of our protocols too. Yep.
How do people estimate percent canopy cover?
Best guess, right? Stand in the middle of the road, and how much does it cover the road?
Oh, okay.
Yep, over the top.
Is there any particular piece of data on here that people were likely to get wrong that would affect the study? The first one I thought of is the identification.
Yes, and so this is what's great is we
Because
also
everybody wants to say, it's a wolf.
right. And we had that one time. We found these great tracks. And we were like, yes, bobcat, right? And everybody wants it to be a bobcat, right? You don't want it to be a fox or a coyote. You're like, dogs. You want it to be the exciting cat. Even a Canada lynx or a puma. You're like, yes. So your brain starts to be like, oh, it's really shaped like this. But what we ask people to do is to snap a photo. So snap a photo of that. And that is a core part of this, is if you can send a photo to us, please do it. And so that helps us. You don't have to learn how to identify things. That's why the percent confidence is there. So then you send us the photo and your information, and then we look at it. I send pictures to Kent. I'm like, what is this? I send pictures to my other biologist friends, like these crazy bones that show up in the middle of the road for no reason. And you're just like, okay, well, who do I know that will be able to help me with this? And that's the brilliance of iNaturalist too, is it's a community of observers. And what you can do is you can flag your observation and say, I need help IDing this. I have no idea what this is. And there's thousands of people on there that will just help you figure it out from a really good picture. Our protocols do show you how to take a good picture, and if you come out on one of our walks, we'll teach you how to do that too. Yeah.
How close, for example, I travel I-91 a lot, and so my specialty is hawks, and so I use the mile markers, the point 1, 0.2.
Yep.
Is that close enough for your?
I think so. Yep.
For your purposes.
And those guys tend to hang out in, they have their spot, their territory.
But in terms of roadkill,
Yes. Mile markers are great.
You know, within a 1/10 of a mile.
Yes.
You know, you'd be happy.
Definitely, that would be very helpful. For us too, Maine Audubon did a separate study on interstates because of the safety factor.
Sure, you can't stop.
Yeah, you don't encourage people to stop on the interstate and get a snapshot of that, whatever the dead thing is. And so I get people that send me messages that are like, I had a bobcat at mile marker whatever in Georgia, and so we'll go out and I'll send an intern out to go and cruise that and see if they can get any information about it. So we don't encourage people to do the interstate stuff, but mile markers help. We've done telephone polls, and we're looking at ways to help people better kind of pinpoint this next year where they're finding their animals. We also like live observations, so if it's a successful crossing, we want that too. We have great shots of moose butts and things like that, which is just so fun to see the successful ones. It's really good. So successful and unsuccessful crossings are both of the things that we want to look at. All right. So this is where it kind of gets fun with the movement guilds. So what we want to be able to do then is we want to be able to look at the data in a way that's going to help us make some different decisions on some of the solutions that we can do. So I kind of broke this down. This comes directly from the State of Vermont's Transportation Guide to Wildlife Connectivity and Road Crossings. And there are 8 movement guilds. I don't know why, I just find that so cool. I like the whole guild thing. But I didn't like the names for them, so I changed them just a little bit, okay? So the first guild, and I gotta make sure I'm going in the right order here. All right, so the first guild is small and slow. And when we separate animals into guilds, we're doing this so we can understand how they move and how we can help them move across the road. So small and slow, who do you think small and slow is? Turtles, frogs, toads, salamanders, right? Hedgehogs in Vermont.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. If someone's releasing them, maybe, but no. Hedgehog might fall into the next group because I think they might move a little faster. So small and slow tend to be the invertebrates, frogs, toads, although we're not doing invertebrates. Sorry, that's for other people that are going to take on the gobs of butterflies and dragonfly roadkill, which can be really intense at different times of year. So this helps us kind of think about who's moving across the road, how they move, and how we can create structures or retrofit structures that will serve them. So if you think about, how many of you have heard about the bridge or the culvert in Moncton? That's for salamander crossings, right? So they regraded the land, they put a culvert in, they thought animals have like a certain distance they want to travel, so like moose, when they're moving through something, they want it to be much wider than they are tall.
But they have other animals going through that culvert too.
Right, they do, in Moncton, right?
Take photographs of them.
And everything has a preference. I find it fascinating that otters actually don't want to get their feet wet when they go through under a bridge. They like to be up out of the water a little bit. So simple things like when there's a bridge or a culvert, if we can't afford to replace it, can we put a little like sidewalk on the side? That's like a natural sidewalk for them to move through, okay? Can we create light passages? So some animals don't want to move through something that's really dark. So in some of the projects that were done in Massachusetts, there's actually grates in the roadway to let sunlight through because that distance, that span is a little bit too much. Moose don't like to cross under something that's more than 100 feet. It's got to be wider than they are tall, and it's got to be 100 feet or less, right? So it's just kind of fascinating when you think about how animals want to be able to travel. So small and slow, small and better movers, and this includes birds, which is really, so I put little bird faces next to the ones that include birds. So this would be ground birds. So we have some small mammals, okay? So we might think about some of the different mice, squirrels, rabbits. Who else moved through that? Small slugs.
No, skunks.
I like slugs. Yes, someone for slugs. Everybody needs their Lorax, right? So this would be some of the smaller mammals that are better movers. Okay. So the next one is medium size, high mobility, so they can move quickly. and they are adaptive. So this next group are things like black bear, bobcat, coyote, and lynx, where they will adapt to underpasses if they're designed in a way that's favorable to them. Just really kind of cool. All right, big, high, I love this one. Big, high, and needy, okay? So these are the ones that are like, they're like chickens. They're like scared, okay? So if you're big, you have high mobility, and you're needy, you're one of those things that might be being preyed upon, and you're a little bit scared or intimidated by different tunnels or culverts or things of that nature, all right? Adaptive ungulates, white-tailed deer and moose are really great. They're able to kind of move through things easy, and they're very adaptive. Then there's like, oh wait, sorry, big, high, and needy. So big, high, and needy are the cats. Sorry, I got that one backwards. Big, high, and needy are the cats. So cats have very specific needs. And so we have to think about how we make sure culverts, tunnels, bridges will serve those needs. This one is the scared, high, and needy. So they need a certain type of structure. They're the ones that are being chased. And grouse actually fall into this category, which I found really curious. I found and for roadkill it was really beautiful, but it's sad. And you can see it on iNaturalist if you want. But it is a woodcock that got hit by a car. And what was so amazing about it was really sad. But it got hit in a way that you could see the tongue of the bird that it uses to probe the ground. So the beak had been open, and you could just, and the wings, anyways, and it made me think about being preyed upon. So was that bird shooting across the road because it was being pursued by some kind of aerial raptor or something? All right, so scared, high, and needy. And then we have arboreal. Squirrels. But what kind of squirrels? Flying squirrels. Oh. Can you believe there are people out there who have designed crossing structures for flying squirrels? So how do we improve the canopy over the roadway so a flying squirrel population can move from one side to another? Can I create a bridge? This is a great science project. Creating bridges for squirrels or things that are arboreal. And then aerial. We know what that is. Birds. So birds and bats kind of fall into this category. So how, again, if we think about mowing regimes on the side of the road, we have to do that for safety. We have to do that for maintenance. But how do we do it in a way that we're still providing cover for animals? Bobcats like thickets. So what's really interesting about bobcats and stuff on the side of the road is one of the recommendations is to plant dogwood. So gray osier dogwood and red osier dogwood on the side of the road so the animal has really nice cover before it goes across the road. So.
Oh, it wants to watch before it goes.
Yes, exactly. Needs that secretive. They're very secretive, right? So
as opposed to the deer that just go.
Yeah, like those two today. All right, arboreal and aerial. So one of the most fascinating things about this is I got a little bit of pushback when I wanted to add birds to this. Because it was like, well, birds just fly over. They're going to do fine. Wait till you see the data from the first year. It's really kind of cool. So I'm going to pass that out right now. All right, drum roll. We're going to do drum roll because this is the first time I'm releasing this. Yes! Don't tell my board that you're getting it before they are. Whoa. All right. And I have a set. So we basically, again, we looked back at how Maine Audubon reported out what they found. And one of the first times that I went out, the very first thing that I found in Belvedere, doing, 118 that comes down between Montgomery and Belvedere,
How many do you want to fish?
is a bird. I found a chickadee on the side of the road. That was my first one. And it was in shrub scrub. So shrub scrub on either side of the road. It's just kind of fascinating. Not what I expected at all. My second animal on that route was a skunk. A little bit more expected, okay? And so when we put the numbers together, it was really kind of cool. And if you flip to the back first, the like pie chart visuals are really kind of interesting. So this is just different groups of animals reported. All right. So mammals obviously were the biggest chunk, but then birds were the next one. What bird do you think drove our numbers right through the roof?
Starling.
Turkeys.
Turkey.
Turkeys, right? And what was really cool that even we could even see, so the field season goes from April through September. We're going to probably push it into October this year. And we take sightings year round. So right now, oddly enough, I'm actually getting a lot of sightings of bobcats, which is great because that's like a key core species for some of the work that we're doing. But so April through September, so some of the other trends that we're starting to be able to see are when are these animals moving, right? So springtime, we got lots of turkey movement. Guess the animal that we had a lot of movement for in the springtime. It's like not the one you would think of. You're close.
Beaver.
Porcupine. Yes. Like that was just amazing. All of a sudden, one week it was like 5, sightings coming through on the website of porcupine. It was really cool.
Mid-October,
Yeah.
I did a trip from Brattleboro to Concord, New Hampshire, and saw 3 dead porcupines on Route 9.
Yeah.
Just
Right.
and supposedly they're young females being driven
Right.
off
So
the,
that dispersal
the
thing,
dispersal.
right? The dispersal and
they-
that drive
do
to
they
mate.
sex them?
mama boys and the females get chased off, I think.
I'm not sure.
Because
That's what my
beavers-
porcupine
Yeah.
friends
Beavers,
say.
the females, when they become of age, they go up and down the river, and the
Yep.
males go over land to the next river. So it's always the males that get killed,
Yeah.
roadkill.
And yeah, so we're
But you're not going that far.
we're not sexing them. No, that's not on the
No
form.
skirt, must
You're
be a male.
really-
Right?
Is it a male or female porcupine? Go. That's a barrier right there. So we're gonna take out the barriers. Just tell me what you think it is, and if you don't know, just snap a photo of it. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the front here. So this is our first season. And we recruited online through our membership. I went and talked to all of the town conservation commissions, signed those people up right there. And we put it on Facebook. We used social media. We did a press release, and we got on TV, and we did a radio thing. And so we ended up with 27 individual volunteers, and this is people that also, it's got to be more than that because there's more on the iNaturalist, that's why. So there's actually more than this because iNaturalist is people from all over the state. These numbers are just for our service area. So 137 observations, 232 individual animals recorded, 46% were dead, and 54% were live animals. So volunteers identified 61 different species. The number of different species of birds was fascinating to me. Robin, blue jay, chickadee, there was a sparrow, hawk, a couple of hawks, owl, harrier. Turkeys all made it across. I don't think we had any dead turkeys. People just are like, whoa. And grouse. Oh, and woodcock. So the birds really kind of blew my mind. Different animal groups observed and the percent dead and alive. So amphibians, if you look at amphibians and reptiles, that's kind of fascinating. Just after the first year, most of them dead, not many alive. We did not get folks out on the big night. This year, when that first warm spring rain occurs, we're going to try to get more folks to be capturing data then. Turtle hatching season will be another time. There was one spot that we went to in Enosburg. Oh, and that was sad. It was like, oh, look, a baby turtle. And then it was like, oh, there's another one, and another one, and another one, and another one. It was like the whole nest just got blown out.
I was driving home like before dawn one morning, foggy morning, and the frogs were out on the road up by Marlboro College.
Yeah.
And it was like pop, 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 pop.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, just like heartbreaking.
Disgusting.
And then, like when you get out to help them, like I do,
No, they were just-
people call the cops on you,
Oh.
and you're like the crazy frog lady. And like, man,
And all
what are
the-
you
and
doing?
it was- it
I'm
was
helping great tree frogs across the road.
There was a little, you know,
So-
British sports car, so I'm like right
Oh.
behind my headlights, so I'm looking at these eyes, looking right at me. I'm like, is this
So
what I can do?
you have some penance to do here. I'm going to see lots of observations for you in the next year. All right. So anybody have any questions about the data? There's another cool kind of graph on the other side of some of the more common things that we
I
came
do.
across. These were just the top ones that we saw. We didn't break them all down.
Do you have any estimate of the total population of each species?
No,
You can't do percentage of,
no.
because I mean, obviously, like there's a lot fewer moose than there are white-tailed deer.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot fewer moose get killed, but as a percentage of the population. I wonder.
Right in our area. Yeah, definitely.
Just curious.
Yep.
What do you do, or what's the significance of the dead versus alive data? Because I would think that would be very biased by just the animal's natural behavior, hanging around or not hanging around.
So I guess it gives us an opportunity to go back at that spot and see what barriers are there and what barriers aren't there. And if we just looked at unsuccessful crossings, we wouldn't have enough information, right? And then there's tons that we're missing too,
Well,
right?
it also get. It seems like if it got biased toward successful crossings, you know that was a safe place to cross, as opposed to another place that has a ton of road.
And it might not be though.
I don't know.
Do you ever study those areas with like
Not yet.
wildlife cams?
Trail
so that
Not
you
yet.
can
So yeah. Okay.
see if things are
So
alive?
this is like the first layer, right?
Yeah.
So part of doing a citizen science project is to get some good data, right? And we want to set it up in a way that the data is going to be useful. What I'm already seeing that you can't see here because we haven't had an opportunity to crunch that information is where there are hot spots. So one of the other things, the idea is to do this for 5 years and then be able to put out a report that says this is what we're seeing and this is where some of the hot spots are and pinch points and see if they match up with some of the things that we're seeing on the maps. What we just started doing is looking at, we want to match it with a culvert survey. And then we want to layer in the cameras. So right now, TNC and National Wildlife Federation are doing a game camera kind of capture study of different bridges and culverts and things like that. If you have not checked that out or haven't seen any of their information, it is absolutely fascinating to see what they're able to capture with game cameras. So for us, game cameras is a cost that was a barrier, so we're not quite there yet. So the next thing will be the culverts. So I had an intern go out and what we're thinking is for the volunteers that are a little bit more into it, what we're going to be able to do is can you grab and capture some images and pictures and information about the culverts that you're seeing. And we're still trying to find some really good culvert survey protocols that are not just about infrastructure or aquatic organism passage, but are also about terrestrial animal passage. So we want that whole mix of information when we ask volunteers to go out, and we want to do it in a way that makes it really simple. What's cool is Bakersfield has already done that, so we have a little bit of information from them, but we're hoping to get there. All right, solutions. This is the exciting part. Right, so remember my baby turtles? So there's a couple of different ways that we can look at solutions and work with towns and the transportation departments. So one of them is signage. And I was watching the moose signs on 89 and as I was coming down. And one of the things I always think with that is who checks those? Like who makes sure that that's still relevant, right? And how do we know, and who are those eyes to be able to do that? So that's part of what some of this project can do. So if we can also map where those crossing signs are, and then figure out if they need to be moved or shifted to another place, or if we need a different sign. Has anybody seen the turtle signs going up in the state?
Yeah.
Yay! They're awesome. They don't say slow crossing. That's kind of a joke. I think it's, I can't remember what it is. It's not, that's not what it says. It says something else. But the other cool thing about it is the sign folds up. So they only put it down during the season, right? Because if you're a motorist that drives the Sandbar Causeway, this is the spot where I see them all the time out to the islands, right? And you drive that all the time, you're just gonna tune all that out after a while. It's just sign, whatever, sign. But if that folds down, up and down, Or in some different states, they put lights on them, so there's like little flashers when it's that time of year, especially for little salamanders, frogs, okay? So that kind of thing, so we can look better at signage. Structures is the big thing, and I think about how a lot of people are still suffering from Irene. We're putting culverts in that are too small. We're not always, when we think animals, we're thinking about aquatic organism passage. We're not thinking about wildlife passage. So how do we make sure that people are thinking about all those things? Well, part of it is saying, we found tracks in the mud at this culvert that you guys are about to replace of otter. I had 2 otters. I was in St. Albans, and I was driving out through the farm fields out toward the lake, from the city to the lake, and the Stevens Brook like wraps all through the city and then comes out through the farm fields. And a small, I wouldn't say the culvert was much bigger than this, underneath the road. And I'm driving along, and literally farms on either side, and 2 otters popped out of the stream bed, ran up over the road, and then back down again. They don't like to get their feet wet. We need a little set of stepping stones in there for those guys. So, it's simple things like that. So some structures we can retrofit, and other structures maybe we will feel really strongly to replace or put in, like the Moncton crossing, right? And if we have the data that says there is an animal, a salamander, that's on the state wildlife action plan that is a species of greatest conservation need in the state, and we have that record that we can bring to the town or to the state when we write a grant, we're in, right? And that's exactly what Moncton did. So they took that time to get that data, to be able to put it together, to get the money to do that. Behavior change is another piece. So, and we're talking both people and animals. That story I told about shifting where the field was, where the waste corn was, the farmer wasn't leaving it behind anymore, so the deer weren't moving across the fields in that area. And then people behavior. So I think about how do we cue people in a little bit better. The state's been doing a great job of putting out some press releases during different times of year. This is the time of year when moose are crossing. Who's seen the story about barred owls right now? Yeah. Oh, so lots of barred owl impacts right now with cars. They're pushed to the edges when the snow gets deep in some areas and it becomes too difficult to get prey through the snow. They're hunting at edges, and the edge of the road is a really great spot for that, right? Until, and I'm going to use the joke again for those of you who are earlier, until your timing is off, right? And then it's not so good. So the wildlife rehabilitators are seeing an uptick in barred owls right now. So maybe there's a nighttime barred owl sign in certain areas. And if we had that data of where maybe some of those things are happening in a cluster, and we can do something about it. And then for us at Cold Hollow to Canada, these are kind of the 3 that pop up a lot. The next part is conservation and stewardship. So how do we protect some of those linkage habitats on either side of the road that you see in those hatch marked areas? How do we get to know the landowners in that area and make them aware that they are in a core kind of corridor for some really cool animals? And how do we move them towards good stewardship of the landscape and hopefully ultimately conservation? So, in a nutshell, that is what we're going for with the Wild Paths project. And it is all open and out there so that other towns can grab a hold of it, and we can have a set of data that could work statewide for all of us to make some of these changes. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Okay, Flatlander here. I moved here 15 years ago, and I was asking about these, moose crossing, bear crossing.
Yeah.
And I was told if one of those animals is killed by law, the state laws, they have to put a sign there, because if one went across in that area or found food in that area, more likely another one will come through again. Happened to run into a guy up in Plainfield who works for the state, and he said that is a bunch of bunk, and we put them up for the tourists. So I'm assuming there would be some kind of protocol, what goes up.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could find that information out through the transportation department. What's great is they do keep data on moose and bear collisions. They try their best to keep track of deer collisions. I think deer collisions per year in the state are between, I want to say 3,000 and 4,000 on average, per year. So that's a lot to try to keep track of. And there are a lot of deer. So I hope it's not tourist driven.
It's brilliant.
I
Makes
know,
people
it's
drive
pretty
careful
smart, right?
and get some really interesting.
Does Forrest have?
I know.
Can
I'm gonna
you shed light on
Forrest
it?
on the spot.
I don't think it's because of tourists. The highway department does keep their own data, especially on moose and also in deer. So
Yeah.
they'll on their own, without even working with the Fish and Wildlife Department, sometimes say, boy, we've got to put a sign up here
Right.
and do it. But also, I think sometimes the squeaky wheel, if there's some people in the
Community.
town that say, we need a sign here,
Yeah.
then V-Trans
Right.
puts one up as well.
Or we're gonna move them. So there is that information out there. The other thing that I learned in my area, and I still have to get data from them, is I wanted to find out who gets called when there is a deer collision or a moose collision, or even bobcat or bear, I'm sure. But it's our state police department, and so we don't have the game. It's not the game warden, but it's the person who's in charge of that is within the state police department. And you can request those statistics from the state police department. And so that's another layer that we're hoping to add in this next year, is not only getting that data from that department, but then also working with the state police to be like, okay, so you could capture this on iNaturalist for us. Or you could look for some other species. We'd like to know bobcat, we'd like to know fisher, we'd like to know marten. Or where are those places at night where there's tons of frogs or salamanders, that kind of thing. And also train town highway departments the same way, because they come across stuff all the time, especially like the snapping turtle thing. And snapping turtles are notorious for nesting right on the edge of roadways, because that's where it's sandy and it's warm and it's going to help the eggs develop. So. Yeah.
Is anybody studying whether some of these deadly crossings actually look safe from the animal's point of view?
Yeah, and what's really cool is some of the work that TNC is doing with the game cameras in culverts and bridges also looks at what's growing along the edge of the culvert or the bridge. I went to a transportation, there's a great conference that happens annually. It's the New England or Northeastern Wildlife and Transportation Conference, where people from, I know, right? Cool. I went this for the first time this year, and it was really cool. So the transportation people and the wildlife people and the nonprofit organizations like us all get together and we talk about solutions and great projects and things like that. And then we go out on field trips and we look at some of the projects that have been implemented. And one of the ones that I saw that really blew me away was this really great, very expensive culvert design. It's called a D culvert. So when you think of culverts, the typical culvert that's really round, one of the things that they want to try to get away from so that you don't have the drops that go off the side, where it's like that beautiful waterfall at the end of the culvert. That's not good. We don't really want those. Like the otter comes out and he's like, ah! Actually, he's going over the road, so it doesn't matter. And fish can't move through that, and amphibians can't move through that, right? And terrestrial animals can't move through that if there was the option. So they put this beautiful D culvert, so flat on the bottom and the curve on the top, and they, oh my goodness, it was mind blowing. I'm like, who thinks that way? Because I don't think that way. But they designed the stream bed, so they went back and put the rocks in a way that would cause these lovely cascading pools that were just right for animals to be able to move upstream or downstream in. And then the rocks along the side were all placed at an angle and a grade that would allow animals to move up and over if they wanted to, and that they even thought about the types of shrubs that went in there that would provide cover, whether it was cover if you needed to cross the road, or cover so that when you came out of the tunnel you had a view so you could look either way for predators. So all of that is starting to go into the work that's happening in terms of retrofitting infrastructure. And I gotta say, from what I gleaned from all the other states that were there at this conference, Vermont has a really great relationship with its transportation department, and the transportation department is very open to doing things in this manner, to do great things for our wildlife here in the state.
Well, we've been a nature tourism state for a
know,
long
right?
time.
Right? Yeah.
So if we wanted to try to get our local conservation commission, other people more involved in this,
So if we want to get other conservation commissions involved in it,
who would we talk to? Yeah, okay.
yeah, call me up.
Okay, so you're.
Send me an
you're
email,
doing this.
and I will share the field sheets. There's a whole, so our website is coldholidaycanada.org. The WebPast project is on there. The data sheets, the protocol is on there, and the online form is on there as well. On iNaturalist, it's the Wild Paths project, and what's great through iNaturalist is the amount of data that you have to collect is actually smaller. So the way our data sheets have been designed is so that if you're like one of those go-getters and you really want to give us a lot of information, that's great. The things that we really want are date, place, time, what the animal was or what you think it was, and a photo. So that's like the basic. And then it's just learning how to rally people and get and tap into the right folks. It's what I love about social media is you can get a lot of people's attention. There's always going to be the core group of people who are like the diehards. Like I have two people, and luckily they are in two of the modeled hotspots. So we're talking 242 and 105, right up near the border. So J Peak, coming down from J Peak into Montgomery, and 105 that goes around J and up to the north, parallel to the border. So those have been two identified spots that are really important to look at. And I got two key people who just are out all the time, and they are like the go-getters. The other people, I have to kick them in the pants all the time. It's like an email that's like, hey, it's time to go, and I send them pictures of dead animals, and no, I'm joking, but I'm not joking, because we really do. I send, so if you're on my mailing list for it, I'm like, this is the shot that we have of the month. That's something I learned from Kent, was, right, with the Vermont Atlas of Life. They have a photo of the month, and people vote on it. So we have great we have happy photos, right? The moose butt is a happy photo, right? We have the snapping turtle that made it across the road, things like that. So it is a lot of work, which is why this project failed to begin with. So you have to have a coordinator who's willing to get out there and make sure people are going to stay involved. And you got to make it easy for people to participate. The more barriers you put in the way, the less likely you are to have success. I'm really excited with these numbers for the first year because I can already see trends there, and we have an idea of how we're gonna get people excited about next year.
So we have 27 people covering how big an area?
So 7 towns right now. 27 people covering 7 towns. Soon to be 50 for next year, hopefully. All right, I'm gonna go in the front because your arm's getting tired. I can see you. You're like, oh.
Do you know was there a certain number one animal for the 4 different groups of animals?
The number one animal that we saw the most?
Yeah. In the 4 different groups.
Yes. So if you look on, you didn't get one of these, that's why. So the donut, if you look at the charts, the donut chart is the one that has, so white-tailed deer were the most, that we got the most reports of. And then what's the next one? Squirrels and chipmunks, right? And then turkeys. And then snakes. There you go.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If we come upon an animal injured, what do we do? Stay with it?
Stay away from it and I would call the police, right? Because so in our place, it's you call the state police and you let them know that there's an injured animal on the side of the road, and they will hopefully point you in the right direction. Yeah, that's what I would do. Or if you know your local game warden, I would do that as well.
In our area, they say call the state police, and the state police will contact the game warden.
Right. Well, great. Good. Yep.
And he'll come out and shoot it.
One of my interns saw a very fresh killed coyote, and she's like, Bridget, it was the first time I was scared. And I was like, really, with all the dangers of pulling over on the side of the road? And she's like, it's the first time that I was scared because it was so. She's like, I passed. She's like, she saw the hit, and so when she turned around to come back to it, she wasn't sure that it was dead yet. but she got a picture. But yeah, so she was like, so there are those things too that we have to keep improving the protocols to let folks know to pull over the right way, to to approach at a safe distance. We don't ask people to touch things at all. We're not asking you to move stuff. Yeah, just leave it where it is.
The injured poisonous jellyfish.
I know, right?
Look, it's fine.
The coyote. I'm just taking a nap. No. Any other questions? See, you have to have a sense of humor after like going out and looking at lots of dead
What
animals.
was she scared of? Was she scared she was gonna get attacked?
She thought it wasn't dead yet, so it would be injured, and if she walked up to it, that it would try to move.
Right.
And then she was like, I didn't know what to do, and it was like this long email, and I was like, well, and she was like, it was dead, so it's okay. But it was like all these things that I hadn't thought about. I was like, oh, I don't know. Well, you guys, thank you so much.